integers. Integers. Recall that integers are whole numbers, they're opposites, and zero. So this is the integer number line. These are your negative integers, these are your positive integers, and then we also have zero. Just some basic vocabulary terms. Opposites. Those are your positive and negative values that are the same distance from zero. For example, negative 5 and positive 5 are both 5 spaces, or each 5 spaces from zero. So negative 5 and positive 5 are opposites. Or negative 7 and positive 7 are opposites. Absolute value. Absolute value is a number's distance from zero. So, for example, the integer 6 is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 spaces from zero. Notice I'm counting the spaces. I'm not counting these lines. So the absolute value of 6 is 6. We denote absolute value using these two lines right here. That means absolute value. So the absolute value of 6 is 6. The absolute value of negative 4. How many spaces is it from 0? 1, 2, 3, 4. So the absolute value of negative 4, remember these two lines right here mean absolute value. The absolute value of negative 4 is 4 because it is 4 spaces from 0. Notice absolute value is always positive. Absolute value is always positive because we're talking about distance, and distance is never negative. And zero pair. Zero pair would be a pair of numbers, so two numbers that have a sum of 0. In other words, when you add them, you get 0. For example, we could take the opposites, negative 3 and 3. That would be a 0 pair, because if we add 3 to negative 3, we get 0. So here's negative 3, and we add 3, 1, 2, 3, we get 0. Or we could say 2 and negative 2. Those are a 0 pair. We have 2 plus a negative 2. That equals 0. Here we have 2. If we start at 2, we're adding negative 2, so that means we're going back. We're going 1, 2 spaces to the left. That's 0. So your opposites are also 0 pairs. Opposites are also 0 pairs. Now, make sure that you have written down the important vocabulary terms and that you have written down the examples. Now I want you to do your summary. I want you to write a summary, a paragraph that explains the concepts in the video. I know you're going to write definitions, and that's okay. I just want you to write everything in a complete sentence. I also want you to include real-world examples of integers. Maybe you can talk about money or yards gained or lost on a football field, walking up and down stairs. And then I also want you to write down any questions that we can talk about in class that you still have about concepts in the video. Adding integers. All right, I'm going to show you a couple of ways to model adding integers. First of all, on the two color counters, the yellow are positive and then the red would be negative. So I'm going to start with 2 positives right here, and to that I'm going to add 3 more positives. 1, 2, 3. So then you ask yourself, do I have any 0 pairs? Is anything going to 0 out? No, because I only have positives. So 2 plus 3 is 5. All right, another way to look at it would be using a number line. So you're going to start at 0, always start at 0 when you're on a number line. And you're going to move over 2 spaces to the right. I'm going to count the spaces, not the lines. 1, 2 spaces to the right because I'm positive 2. And then 1, 2, 3 spaces to the right. So where do I end up? At positive 5. All right, let me show you a T-chart. So I have negatives on the left, positives on the right. So what you're going to do is you're going to say, okay, I have 2 positives, so I'm going to draw 2 pluses over here. And then I also have 3 positives. 1, 2, 3. I have nothing on the left, so what am I have altogether? I have 5 positives. Now, another way, instead of drawing the actual pluses and minuses, or the positives and negatives, you would just write 2 and 3, and you have nothing over on this side. So combine those, and your final answer is 5. So now let's look at negative 2 plus negative 3. So I'm going to start, and I'm going to put 2 negatives here. And then what else do I have? I have 3 more negatives. 3 more negatives. So what do I have altogether? I have 5 negatives, so my answer is negative 5. When you write your answers, I want you to box it so that I can tell the difference between the negative and the equal sign. All right, let's look at the number line. So where do we always start? We start at 0. This time we're going to move to the left because I have 2 negatives. 1, 2, I'm counting the spaces again, not the lines. So then I go 1, 2, 3 more spaces to the left. Where do I end up with? Again, at negative 5. Now let's look at our T-chart. So again, I'm going to draw 2 negatives, 1, 2 negatives, and then I'm going to draw 3 more negatives, 1, 2, 3. So what do I have? Altogether, I have 5 negatives. But let's now just look at it as numbers. So I've got 2 negatives over here, and I guess I don't need to label 2, but I've got 2 negatives, or the negative sign, and then I have 3 negatives. So what do I have altogether? I have 5 negatives. I'm just adding. So negatives and more negatives makes even more negatives. All right, what if we have a negative and a positive together? So now I've got 2 positives, and then I have 3 negatives. So what happens, remember, when you have positives and negatives together? So these guys get together and they zero out. Remember, that's a 0 pair. So these guys are a 0 pair. So what am I left with? I'm left with 1 negative. So my final answer is negative 1. All right, now let's look at the number line. All right, so I've got positive 2, so I'm going to go 1, 2 spaces to the right because it's positive, and then I'm going to move 1, 2, 3 spaces to the left because I had a negative 3. A lot of people ask me, do you count 0? Yes, because you're counting the spaces. 1 space, 2 spaces, 3 spaces. So that is a negative 1. Now we'll look at our T-chart. So we're going to start with 2 positives. So 1, 2 positives, and then 3 negatives. 1, 2, 3 negatives. So remember what happens. There's a 0 pair. Zeroes out. 2 0 pairs, 0 out. So what are we left with? Just this 1 negative. Now let's look at it like this. What if I had a 2 on the right and a negative 3 on the left? So now you've got to look, well, what do I have more of? I have more negatives than positives. So I know I'm going to have a 0 pair. So let's go ahead and rewrite this as negative 2 and 2, and then I'm going to erase that, and then negative 1. So now I have my 0 pairs, and those zeroed out. So what am I left with? Negative 1. All right, now let's look at it one more way. So I've got 2 negatives here, and then I have 3 positives. So what's going to happen? 0 pair, 0 pair. What am I left with? 1 positive. So 2 Negative 2 plus 3 is a positive 1. All right, number line. So we start at 0. We're going to move left 2 spaces. 1, 2 spaces to the left. Now we're going to move right 3 spaces. 1, 2, 3 spaces. So where did we end up with, or where did we end up at? Positive 1. Now let's look at T-chart. All right, so I've got 2 negatives and I have 3 positives. So what happens? 0 pair, 0 pair. So what are we left with? Maybe if I do it in blue, it's a little more obvious. 1 positive. So negative 2 plus 3 is a positive 1. So now let's look at it this way. I've got, I'm going to do this in red, 2 negatives and 3 positives. So since I have something on the left and the right, I know that I'm going to have some 0 pairs. So now let's make it even. Let's go, you know what? It's black for this. I've got negative 2. I'm going to keep that the same. And then I'm going to take that 3 and make it into a 2 and a 1. So now what can I do? I have a 0 pair here, and what am I left with? A positive 1. All right, so let's work these practice problems. Negative 4 plus a negative 5. Well, if I've got negative 4 negatives here and 5 negatives also on the left, I have no 0 pairs on this side. So I'm just going to combine all of my negatives, and I'm going to get negative 9. 4 negatives and 5 more negatives make 9 negatives. All right, now I've got 14 positives, and I have 21 negatives. So since I have something on the left and the right, I know I'm going to have some 0 pairs. So let's rewrite, and I'm going to use a different color to make it easier for you to see. So I know that I've got 14 over here, and I can take that 21 negatives, and I can say I know I have 14 negatives, and then I have 7 more negatives, because 14 and 7 makes 21. So now I have a 0 pair here, and what am I left with? 7 negatives. All right, so now I've got 15 negatives, and I have 10 positives. Since I have something on the left and the right, I know that I can create a 0 pair. So I know that I have fewer positives, so I'm going to have to keep my positives. And then I can say, take 10 of my negatives, and I know that I still have 5 negatives left. So this is my 0 pair, and what am I left with? I'm left with 5 negatives. So negative 5. All right, now I've got 38 positives over here, and I have 12 negatives. What do I have fewer of? I've got fewer of my negatives. I have less negatives, so I'm going to keep the 12 negatives over here, and I'm going to match it with 12 negatives over here. 12 positives. So I took 12 of those positives from the 38. So really I'm just subtracting out, so I have 26 left over, because here's my 0 pair, so what am I left with? 26 positives. So 38 plus negative 12 is 26. All right, now I want you to think about these questions. What happens when you add 2 positives, 2 negatives? What about when you add a negative and a positive? How do you know your answer is positive or negative? Because then I want you to write a summary paragraph including the answers to those questions, and I want you to write down questions that we can discuss in class. Guys, make sure that you watch this video several times, because this was actually a lot of information.